Welcome back to Tide Pod, where it's been a minute. We're diving back into some news. We've got Tony on. We're gonna do kind of some football housekeeping stuff, so to speak. The dust kind of feels like it's settling. I guess the thing, if you didn't learn already, you're learning it now. There is no real off season in football. There's drama everywhere, new players, new coaches. Everywhere you turn, every new week. So there's plenty to dive into. So we're gonna get into some of that, but first, Tony, we're gonna take a deep dive, I guess. Just take a look back at the Alabama guys who are departing this program and going on to pastures new in the Senior Bowl. It's Senior Bowl week. I know you wrote an article. Oh, also, we're gonna talk some Alabama hoops later in the show with Jordan Harper. So we'll get to that. It's been a great season, a great start to conference play for the Crimson Tide, but yeah, Tony, that's kind of the most recent update here with some of the guys on the current team or team of last year. The Senior Bowl's upcoming. Alabama has 3 guys participating. What can you tell us about them? It's Chris Braswell, Justin Eboigbe, Will Reichard. They will all be featured. What can Bama fans expect from that bowl down in Mobile for those guys?
We've definitely had like larger groups of Senior Bowl invitees. It kind of seems like the majority of the draft prospects are juniors, so they're not there. But I think we're getting three guys that have all had really great years. You look at Chris Braswell. He's kind of playing like second or third fiddle in the pass rushing unit, but behind 2 first-round picks in Dallas Turner and Will Anderson. Now he gets that more like what you would call a starting role or whatever on the first team defense. He gets his role on the defense and he makes the best of it. One of the more productive pass rushers in the conference this year. And I think, to the casual, to the person that doesn't like, I'm always playing with that PFF mock draft machine. I'm given a competitor or somewhat of a competitor a shout out on this pod, I guess. But no, I'm always playing with that. I love mock drafts, especially now that my Patriots are bad. I like to just kind of take a look at that. But I think to the casual fan that maybe doesn't look at that, they're going to be surprised to find that, Chris Braswell is a legitimate, like maybe a first round pick. I think there's been a lot of mock drafts that have had him late first. If he's not, he's going to be a very early day 2 guy. He's a elite pass rusher, and he's somebody that has all the traits. He was a 5-star kid coming out of high school, and he's a guy that has the ability to really get to the quarterback. He's going to be able to do that in the NFL. I think the thing he's going to look to show down in Mobile is that he can set the edge as a runner, as against the run. And he had some opportunities for open field tackles that he kind of missed on at times. If we're breaking down his game a little bit, that's something that I think he'll have to show, and just his versatility to be just more than a pass rusher at the next level. But even as just a pass rusher, right? I mean, that's such an important position that I think he's going to be a higher pick than maybe some people would think. That I'm not surprised by it, but he's definitely if you look at the 3 players that are going there, he's got the chance to really earn some big bucks this week. I think if he can solidify being a number 1 a first round pick, I think that this is where that all starts for him. He's going to have a good combine, but teams look at what you're able to do at the Senior Bowl, especially for a guy like him who's looking to prove different areas of his game. I think he's going to measure out well with us, from a athletic ability standpoint. So I don't think the combine is going to be really he'll post good numbers there. But this is the kind of week where it could be really decisive for a guy like that. And then moving on to Justin Eboigbe, Justin Eboigbe is kind of if Braswell has that elite athleticism that's going to take him the majority of the way, Eboigbe's got like everything else. I don't think he's elite in any category. He's a little bit undersized if you make him a defensive tackle. He's not quite fast enough if you're going to make him an edge guy, but he is so solid. And to come back from his season-ending injury the year before and to put up the numbers that he did, he's just a guy that is going to make it in the NFL. In my story today, from what I'd seen, he's probably a 4th, 5th round guy. I don't know if he's going to be able to do anything in Mobile that's going to vault him into that day 2 range. I mean, it's so hard to go day 2. The second and third rounders, that's tough. And I don't know from just a size and natural athleticism standpoint, Justin Eboigbe is going to vault himself. But I think another good showing in Mobile, he could be one of the first, the early day 3 guys. So we're talking, fourth round, early fourth, maybe, that could be maybe his ceiling just from what I see. He's a guy, and it's going to come down to versatility. And I think, when you look at the Senior Bowl, he's going to strive at being able to show, okay, I can play out of the 3. I can play out of the 5 technique. You could even stand me up and be an edge rusher. That's probably not what we're doing with Justin Eboigbe, but like, if he can prove that he can do different things, I think that's going to be really key this week. And so that's kind of, I know he talked with someone, earlier this month, and he kind of mentioned, like, I want to show my versatility, and that's what he's got to do. And then the most prolific of the 3 that are going is Will Reichard. I mean, how do you get more prolific than him, the NCAA points leader? Look, for Will Reichard, I don't think he's going to do anything at the Senior Bowl one way or another that's going to hurt or help his draft stock. But for him, it's one last opportunity to put on that Crimson Tide helmet. He's going to be in front of a lot of Alabama fans down there. They're going to love to see him have one more send off. And Will Reichard will be around NFL teams. So he gets to meet with teams. He gets to show them what he's all about. He's a great guy, and there's only 32 kickers. And so you're not going to draft, an a-hole, I mean, like, you're going to draft
you can't have a locker room toxic guy in your,
yeah. Like, you're going to want a guy that, is going to be cool and collected. He's going to be a good team player. You don't want your, problem, I just think the character, and now there's a lot of good character kickers, so that's probably not even going to matter either. But if you're looking for things that Will Reichard could get out of this, I would say just being in front of NFL teams and showing what he's all about. And I mean, anybody that knows about kicking, anybody in that world has been marveling over Will Reichard for the last 5 years or more, since he's been coming to camps as a high school phenom. So I think people know that he's really good. I think the thing that he helped himself out with was, that coming back for that 5th year at Alabama, one of the things he talked about with Nick Saban was, improving the kickoffs, and he was able to do that. So I really don't think there's I think he's already improved his draft stock. I put a 5th to 7th round projection on him for the story, but like, who knows, man, because it's so up in the air about kickers. It's hard to project that. I just did that because I think, just being drafted as a kicker is a big deal. And I do think that somebody probably, takes a chance with him. I do think he's probably one of the best 32 kickers in the world right now. So I think that, he'll find his way on an NFL team.
Yeah, I could see him, like, to qualify maybe more what he might get out of it is, team. He could go meet with the team, and that team could just fall in love with him and say, we want this guy, to cultivate maybe the fan base he got at Alabama. Maybe they see that and see all the people that love him say, oh, we want that in our organization. That's some positivity maybe we're lacking. I don't know. Could be grasping at straws, but
he's got all the form and all the, like, it's not just like he's put up some numbers. I think sometimes, people don't really care about college numbers for kickers. You'll see some of these guys and you're like, oh, why didn't this guy get drafted? I mean, he's had a great career, but like, if he's just has easy kicks, or if his form's not great, but like, if, Will Reichard is like a pitcher, he's like the pitcher that has the perfect, release, great movement on his curveball. Like, he does everything that you need as a kicker. And like, from a not statistical standpoint, from a technique standpoint, all the special teams gurus just marvel over him. So I'd be shocked just from, like, I'm not a special teams guru. I couldn't look at Will Reichard and tell you that he's better form. I don't know why. I just see the ball go through the uprights, 85
a lot.
Yeah, 85% of the time. But what I will say is I've talked to plenty of people who, have a way better understanding of special teams, and they all marvel over just his, his technique, the way he's able to replicate that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets drafted. And you never know. Sometimes, I mean, teams really do fall in love and they draft in the 3rd round or 2nd round. I mean, like, I don't know if I'd ever want my team drafting a 2nd round kicker, but I guess if they were going to do that, the guy that freaking misses is probably a good one. I mean, if you're going to invest crazily on the kicker position, I think Will Reichard has shown that he is very reliable.
It's definitely a very unique spot in terms of, evaluating talent, the kicker position. But yeah, I think overall, in summary, Braswell maybe the guy that you could expect could wind up being the story of the Senior Bowl if he has a really good showing and kind of boosts his status up into that first round,
One
day
thing
one
about
guy.
the Senior Bowl that
Yeah.
I was looking at, and this might help out Braswell. I don't know because he might be more high profile. How did Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. end up on the same team? And like the
Oh, I didn't see
yeah,
that.
they're both on the national team, and like the American team where Braswell is going to be playing is going to have like Pratt from Tulane as their best quarterback, or maybe like Spencer Radler. But it's just like, how do you get like the two Heisman? How do you not split up the two Heisman finalists? Like
They
wouldn't it be great to see Nix versus Penix? Like, why are we putting those two on
part
the?
3.
Yeah, like if I'm on the, it's the Tennessee Titans that are overseeing the American team, and the Jets are overseeing the national team. And if I'm the Titans coaches, I'm like, wait a minute, like,
How did this happen?
yeah, like how did they get both of the guys?
Yeah,
But I say that, but then from a from a pro perspective, I don't know if how that all breaks down. I don't know who's viewed as the better of the quarterbacks. I personally like Michael Penix. I think he's if you
I
put one
agree.
around him, I think he'll be pretty good. I'm skeptical, I guess, of Bo Nix, and this is not a. I'll go off of this really fast because I know this is an Alabama podcast, but I'm skeptical of Bo Nix because we saw the Bo Nix at Auburn, and he's just nothing like the Bo Nix at Oregon. But then again,
Oregon.
Jalen Hurts, Alabama wasn't necessarily as great as Oklahoma, so people do progress afterward.
Certainly.
It'll be interesting to see how both those guys do, but we'll get a chance to see Chris Braswell rushing both of those guys. So.
I was going to say, yeah, maybe it is better for Braswell because they'll be focused on what those guys do. And if they get sacked by Chris Braswell, that'll make Twitter. So, people will see that. But yeah, keep an eye on him, Justin Eboigbe and Will Reichard, and where they might, how they might boost their draft status. We'll obviously have like plenty of draft coverage with all the guys that are going from this past season's team. But let's look back to the future, Tony, in terms of some guys that could come in next year. And one, I'm going to start a bit of a sore spot for you. I know this was your guy, obviously with some coaching movement, starting of course with Saban's retirement. There's some opportunities for some guys to transfer, some guys out there before spring. One of those was Jabbar Muhammad, the cornerback from Washington, who I know you were a big fan of. He did not choose the Crimson Tide, I believe just like 2 or 3 days ago, confirmed he is committing to Oregon, which if you're a Washington fan, ouch, gone to your arch rival there. But, with Alabama not being able to get him, I know secondary is a huge need. What should they be looking at maybe in this next, period where, now you have Harbaugh gone and Michigan guys can enter the portal. There maybe could be an avenue there. What should, who are some names Alabama fans should maybe have an eye on ahead of then, when the portal reopens up in spring for everybody?
First off, for those wondering, Jabbar Muhammad became, I guess, between me, Jack, and some of the title issues, became my guy.
He was his guy.
Yeah, because I was talking with him. He's a great kid. I think Oregon's getting a great kid. And he was such a nice guy that I, just talking with him and doing the interview, I started like looking at more of his clips, and I was like, man, this guy's pretty good, cornerback. I think that would have been a great asset for Alabama. He's a guy that did really well, and did really well for Kalen DeBoer last year. It was his best cornerback, and it's a position of need for Alabama. But look, when you're looking at players that they're going to plug in that cornerback spot, I don't know if there is really one that jumps out, currently available in the portal. I think I'm losing the kid's name, but there's one from Arizona. Arizona's top cornerback. Why is that not coming to my name?
I'll pull it up. I'll do the research.
Excuse the pod for a second while we pull up, and while I'm already bad with names. Takario Davis is in the portal. He's like 6'4", and he had 15 pass breakups, but I don't know if Alabama's in that one. I don't want to throw a name out there and everyone get excited about it. I'm just, if you could give me a guy right now in the portal, that's who I would go for. A big cornerback. like he's G's at 6'4", maybe, I haven't even invested enough time to like look at what, he could do at Alabama, just because I don't necessarily think that that's going to happen. But yeah,
there are, if I may, there are 9 Arizona guys who entered the portal after, of course, their coach left to take over at Washington. Epheson's Prasock, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He's another corner that entered
he
as
just
well.
committed
He,
somewhere,
he, mi-
right?
he might
Or
have
did he
committed
go
somewhere
back?
else.
Forget, yeah.
Some of them have bowed out, I think. This was an older article, but so it seems kind of like it's slim pickings a little bit right now. Obviously, the Michigan situation, like they named Sharon Moore their head coach. That could motivate some of their guys to stay. Maybe you don't see as many exits there. That's still kind of fresh, at that point. But
Ephesians is going to Washington.
Okay. So you just followed his
I
coach.
think a lot of those Arizona guys, like if anyone has a shot at him, it's going to be Washington. The same reason
Right.
why some Washington guys are coming to Alabama.
Yeah.
Also, what a name, Ephesians, right?
Yeah.
They just have to hold out for his brother Proverbs or something. Or
but then we need the symbol, the drum symbol
we need
thing
to like
on here.
it in the
Yeah. Gotta get it. We need a sound. We need a Tide Illustrated soundboard. But so not too many other names. You think Alabama goes? I think it kind of seems like the vibe is the time they really go hard in the portal is when it opens back up for everybody. When there's going to be just that bigger pool of players in April.
You don't want to take people for the sake of taking people,
Mhm.
And we'll get into who they've already got. I think all of the players they brought in, all but one, I would say are going to be probably starters and big time impact players. Or if they're not starters, I mean, they're going to be like heavily used players, So I don't think you just want to bring in a dude just to bring in a guy because you have this window that's open. Like if you're not high on an Arizona player, don't bring him in just because like that's the only guy available.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama has good players. You don't want to. If they're not better than the next guy already, then you don't want them, and it's not like some of the players where Alabama does need help. It's not like they have bad players. They just have freshmen, so
Right.
if you're bringing in a guy that's just going to be wasted space in your roster, not to down anyone in particular, but it's just, it's not going to be worth it. So you wait until the spring when that opens up, and yeah, they won't have the spring practice with the team. But I think at that point, I mean, look at a guy like, Jalen Key or Trey Amos, both of those guys came in after spring practice, and Jalen Key was a starter. Trey Amos would have been a starter this year, and he played a lot last year and was basically the third cornerback. So played a lot. So I don't think it's necessary to just panic. That being said, I mean, if a 5-star tackle was to pop up in the portal, that would be maybe something they would want to look at. Between the cornerback position and the tackle position, you're gonna hope for an impact player at one of those two.
Yeah.
I think you're kind of set almost to a certain extent. I mean, like the secondary was hit hard. Losing Caleb Downs was unexpected. Or it's just there's no way to compensate for that. I mean, man, that he would have been great on this defense, and you just lose a guy like that for Alabama. It's tough. You're not going to find another Caleb Downs. Doesn't matter,
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the best safety in college football next year, So like, who are you going to find, That being said, I think that there are people that you could look at that will open up later on that are going to see Alabama's spring practice, see the sky isn't falling, and then go from there. And I think that people are going to see, oh, maybe there's a starting opening at Alabama's cornerback spot, and I'm a good cornerback, and I want to play on what I think now could be a playoff team. I think there was a lot of panic around Alabama, and everyone's like, well, I don't want to be a part of that. And I think there's also going to be some guys that now I know NIL changes things, so I don't know how that factors in. But I think there's going to be some guys that left Alabama maybe out of a panic that are going to be like, damn, I could have been a part of this team, and this team's not going to be that bad. If Alabama can, if they can establish the offensive line and the cornerback position, and right now those are huge question marks, like bigger the question marks than we've seen in the Saban era. So, that's tough. But if they can fix those, or even just get capable replacements, maybe not even as good, but just capable, this is a playoff team, And I guess I've taken enough time. Well, maybe we should move into some of the reasons why why this is a playoff team, because they have brought in some really good players.
Yeah, I mean, but getting into that, but I'll add too. I feel like when you go to a new coach and a new regime, like it is impressive when you look at someone like Jalen Key or Trey Amos to come in after spring camp and start in a Saban led team that he's already got that culture, he's got everything established there. But I feel like DeBoer is going to be way more welcoming too, of like anyone he can get in that he thinks is going to help him, whether or not they played in spring camp. I feel like will be irrelevant when you're trying to reload and have the best first season you can, as the new coach of Alabama. So, I don't think it's going to matter that too much that they missed, a spring practice. I think if they're good enough and DeBoer likes them enough, they're going to come in and he's going to want them to make a difference for him. It's interesting. I think, you mentioned the tackle and the DB positions, both those hit pretty hard. Another one I think 4 days ago, you would have thrown into that category perhaps is the wide receiver position. But, as we came to find out, and we were late on this on the pod, admittedly. So this is old news in the way the news cycle works now. But Alabama got a playmaker, almost, more or as important, if not more important than any marquee transfer you could have got at this position. When Ryan Williams did the ultimate troll job to Auburn by recommitting and then like canceling his Auburn visit like the moment after the basketball game ended between Alabama and Auburn, which is just all-time moment. Like people were matching up the Twitter like times of the final score graphic versus his graphic that I'm back. But a huge pickup or re-pickup if you're the Crimson Tide, was supposed to commit on February 9th. Then he canceled the Texas visit, and it had started to kind of seemed like whether it was Roll Tide Willie or Jalen Eboigbe or whoever else worked their magic to get him back in the fold, Tony. But just how big is Ryan Williams re-upping with the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think he's going to be a future playmaker. I mean, he's a guy that can come in and start right away. Alabama didn't have a number one receiver. And I'm not saying that we're going to have to see Ryan Williams play college football before we get really carried away. But he is a guy that has number one receiver talent. And, he is reclassified, so he should be a senior in high school next year. And now he's going to be, a freshman in college, and probably if he doesn't start, I think he's going to play a lot. He'll be part of the receiver rotation. We'll see where they use him. Probably, I think he's probably the answer to Isaiah Bond in the slot. I think, you lose Isaiah Bond to Texas. I think you replace him with Ryan Williams. I think he's going to be big. I think, if he develops that starting role at Alabama, I think he's a guy that has the talent to, if everything clicks for him, he could be 1,000-yard receiver. I'm not saying he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver his freshman year, but I mean, you look at the offense that, Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer put together, you look at his talent. We'll see what we get out of the quarterback position, but I think that he's got a chance. And then another person we brought in, Alabama brought in that we didn't mention is Jeremy Bernard. And he's a guy that is kind of, when I look at Jeremy Bernard, I look at him as kind of a, Kendrick Law, maybe not like size for size, but like a Kendrick Law kind of clone, where he's a guy that, that they put him at running back sometimes, or you can get him the ball in open space. And, his numbers don't jump off the page, but you look at what Washington has as receivers, and I think he still had 300, 400 receiving yards. He's a guy I think is going to also break into that starting rotation. So all of a sudden, there was some panic over the Alabama receiving room, but I think you've got, Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Kendrick Law, who am I forgetting? Kobe Prentice. Like you're returning a lot of guys that are, going to be really good players. So I think Jalen Hale, I think, is a guy that, is going to he's going to be really successful in this offense. And so all of a sudden, I think, wide receiver is not a position that you need. In fact, even if there was a big time receiver that was in the portal, I guess Alabama could go after him, but they really wouldn't need to at this point. I like the receivers Alabama has. In fact, I'm very confident, assuming Ryan Williams lives up to the hype, I'm very confident that this receiving core will be better than last year's receiving core. I think I really like the people they brought in.
It is pretty crazy to think that a guy who will be going against players who were, some of them starting college when Ryan Williams was still in middle school, is going to make that big of a difference. I mean, that's kind of wild given the way, given the reclassification and all that, and that he's still such a high recruit. It is that big of a difference, and the hype is there. What do you think of it's DeBoer's Julio, kind of notion that I know a lot. I see it. I mean, it's another in-state
totally
kid.
different players, but yeah, I mean, you look at a guy that could be an instant impact guy. Julio didn't come in with DeBoer's offense, though. I can tell you that. Julio would have loved to have. He would have put up Rome Odunze numbers in DeBoer's offense. Maybe not with John Parker Wilson. I don't know, man. Maybe with John Parker Wilson throwing to him. I mean, I think that offense would have been really fun to watch. So I think just the combination of his potential with this offense, yeah, he could be an instant hit. And I do think that just from a mental standpoint, getting Ryan Williams kind of, I said that there's like some panic around Alabama. I think there's a lot less panic behind, Alabama right now. So and I think that's really huge.
Yeah, definitely. It settles the dust. It makes people just take a deep breath, and they're like, all right, we got that guy. If anything, that's a cornerstone player that you can kind of build through DeBoer's first couple seasons, and you can see what happens. Tony, let's finish off talking about the guy who might be throwing to Ryan Williams and co next year in Jalen Milroe. It's been interesting in the last couple, days and weeks with him. There was, of course, the Alabama-Auburn game with the electric delay, which we'll talk about with Jordan. I want to get his. What were you were in the arena actually that night? You can give your thought. You get your thoughts on that.
It didn't actually look as dramatic as it did on TV. Like
it did look kind of wild
on TV.
Yeah,
like to the point where like, how do they even play this?
I was shocked watching on TV that they didn't stop it right away and they let Janai Broom hit a 3 in the dark before.
Yeah,
made my lead for that game story easier.
Auburn,
so right.
Yeah, Auburn can complain, but I mean, they did pretty well with the lights off.
Yeah,
so,
as Nate Oates said,
there were a lot of jokes from it. There was Bruce Pearl, kind of joking at Alabama's situation with Coleman Coliseum, like, hey, if you want a new stadium, just get a new stadium. Don't have to, you don't have to pretend
make a statement
on the lights, and then, Nate pointed out the fact that maybe they should have kept them off, or maybe Auburn should have requested that they keep them off because obviously, Janai Broom hit that 3. But it was just kind of a bizarre thing. It's like, it's not the first time. It's not like they tried something new with the lights. So I don't know what happened. But it is really funny, though, for the LSU game during the starting lineups, they did not turn off the lights. They were just like, not happening again. So I wonder if we're ever going to see the lights go back off in Coleman, or if they're just going to like never.
They've stayed on since. They've just never turned them off.
They don't even turn them off. Yeah.
They just leave them on all the time.
I would have hated to be. Can you imagine that poor?
It's a lot of pressure.
That poor lighting guy that's just sitting there and they're stopping the game. And, they tried so many times during the game. I don't know if they showed that on TV, but they're like trying, and they tried to make it all red. And then that was like, that looked weird. So they couldn't do that. And then like, it wasn't that the lights were off, is that the lights were red. So yeah, one of the half of the lights were red, and obviously that's not as bright as the bright. So it's not like the lights weren't working, they were just red. It was funny. Funny not for Alabama, it's like those are the kind of things.
Not a good look for them, but yeah, funny for everyone in attendance.
But it was just kind of a bizarre. One of the things about that, I think somebody pointed it out to me. It's a weeknight game. It's a lot of Alabama people from Birmingham. It can be hard to get to Alabama, like to get to Tuscaloosa from Birmingham in traffic. Does that it feels, somebody brought this up and I didn't look for it at the time, but like, I don't know how many empty seats there were, but like, does the extra 30
that's always a theory. That's always a theory.
The extra 30 minutes like help Alabama like reach full capacity and like build it? I don't think that was the case. It was pretty full regardless, and that place was loud. But like, did that help a little bit? Like,
that's funny. When I covered Missouri last season, they had the same thing where the lights went out, and there were people speculating because it was not full then. And they were like, did they shut them off for an extra 10 minutes and let everyone trickle in, and then they turn them back on? They're full. I love that that's still a prevailing theory every time. But yeah,
there's always like the excuse of the
Yeah.
people that like there's always that excuse, and I guess sometimes it holds weight, but like whenever Alabama doesn't have a great crowd, it's always like, well, maybe they're in traffic. It's like, come on, like like it's a 7 o'clock game. If you knew you were gonna, yeah, it's like if you knew and you had the disposable income to like drive, like you probably could. I don't know. Everybody's work situation is different. That's kind of an inconsiderate thing for me to say. I'm just saying, like, chances are you probably could get that Tuscaloosa on time. Chances are the people that were going to make noise at that game were already there.
Yeah.
I think maybe allowed some of the like floor seat people that aren't making a lot of noise, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Maybe it allowed them to get there. So, but I don't know if it, I don't think it mattered. But it's funny to think about.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we'll talk about the actual game with Jordan. We'll dive into it, but it didn't phase the Crimson Tide. Still got that big win over the Tigers. But of course, the lighting being out allowed the ESPN broadcasters to talk to Jalen Milroe for an extended amount of time. He's done that. He had his camp that I saw a report. It was something like he only needed to be there for 2 hours, and he was there for 5 and signing autographs. It kind of almost feels like a little media like hype tour for Jalen Milroe ahead of what is, a season with a lot of expectation, not only for the Tide with a new coach, but for him, a guy who, finished up there in the Heisman voting is, expected to lead this team into the black, so to speak, with a new coach and keep kind of the Alabama way going. Where do you stand with kind of everything with Jalen Milroe, and what were your interpretations of maybe some of the stuff he said on ESPN and all that?
You're gonna see him kissing babies pretty soon. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like an election year,
Yeah, political tour.
No, I think it's great. I think he's doing the things that you would want your starting quarterback to do. He's been the galvanizing force between let's wait and give Kalen DeBoer a chance. I think he probably played I know Alabama lost some players, but I still think that it could have been worse if Jalen Milroe leaves and just quits on this team. And I'm telling you, I know he's probably making a fair share of NIL money from Alabama, but I guarantee a quarterback like that, the highest returning Heisman vote getter, I think that he's making a ton of money, and that he could have made more money probably somewhere else than he could have at Alabama. I mean, I can tell you right now, with the way that Ohio State's spending, I'm sure they would have loved to have Jalen Milroe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think him staying, it was such a big thing for Alabama. And, I think it's just tendency. I know everyone's different, but I'm sure that there are people that are, oh, Jalen's staying, maybe I'll give it a chance. And I think, he's a leader. He's somebody that the players voted a permanent team captain last year, And so him and Terrion Arnold, they're the creators of the link, let all naysayers know. And so, I think that he's an important piece, and it's going to be interesting. I'm sure there's probably a little bit of nerves on his end. I mean, like the thing that he did the best last year is in his athleticism hasn't always been what Kalen DeBoer has utilized. That being said, Kalen DeBoer is a great offensive mind, and you don't get to be a great offensive mind by ignoring, the tools that you have. And I'm sure Kalen DeBoer is going to look at Jalen Milroe and say, okay, we can definitely use this and this and this. And, I've never really used this much of a running quarterback or like this much of a athleticism, but I've never had that, at the same time, we've never seen what Kalen DeBoer would be like with a quarterback that, is 6'2", 230 and can run a 4.4 flat. You know what I'm saying? So I think that that's going to be exciting to see. And I'm sure he's going to find ways to accentuate Milroe's passing ability and just improve on that, but also ways to just, really highlight his playmaking ability with the ball. And, there's could be quarterback powers. There could be, short, run plays to open up things on the perimeter. I mean, like Kalen DeBoer is a smart, and so is Ryan Grubb. They're smart. They're going to figure out ways to use Jalen Milroe. And if it doesn't work out, I mean, Alabama, another transfer we didn't talk about that they brought in is Austin Mack. He was another highly regarded guy. So they've got options. Ty Simpson's returning. So, I mean, Alabama's in a great position with the quarterback position. I think you got Milroe doing everything you want your starting quarterback to do, but then if things for whatever reason don't work out with him, I think you've got a ton of great options behind him. So that's only going to push Jalen Milroe to be even better. It's a lot easier to to push your game further when there's competition behind you. It's competition behind you is not a bad thing. Either Jalen Milroe is going to lose out on the job, which I wouldn't expect at the moment, or he's going to elevate his game even more. And, I think, the best when you look at what Alabama can be, I mean, obviously you want your established quarterback to push his game to another level. I think, I know there's some Alabama fans that, you lose with a quarterback and, the lasting image of you having him is being stuffed at the goal line. And there's like, I don't know, people are so, what have you done for me lately? But like, look at how electric Jalen Milroe was last year. And like, if you can just add on that, that's Alabama's best shot at winning a title. I mean, it is an improved Jalen Milroe. I mean, you look at like, where are there's a lot of talent on this offense, but Jalen Milroe is like the superstar of this offense, assuming he can attain that and, and build off of last year. But like, he could be he's the biggest name on this offense right now,
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that if he can take it and fit it within DeBoer's system, I think it has the potential. Like I wrote about this, like I think it has the potential to be something really, really special if they, kind of find that blend of trusting Milroe and working plays in that let him use his athleticism. Because I think it's too good. You can't just ignore it. You can't pigeonhole him into a role of like a pocket passer and stuff like this. Nor I think at this point can you trust. Maybe this wide receiver core comes into its own, but I think as of right now, you need to scheme plays where Milroe is going to kind of self-create in that way. But I think you're right.
He's not Michael Penix. He's not going to be Michael Penix. They're totally different quarterbacks. Even an improved Jalen Milroe is not going to be Michael Penix.
But I think what you can look at is like, you can look at a guy like Penix and just see how even if he was a different type of quarterback, the way he individually improved under DeBoer in those 2 seasons. I mean, there's no reason why Milroe, whether his stats look a little bit different, they're still going to look really good if he can do the same thing. And you're right. I think off the field, he's doing all the right things. Like seems very bought in and just ready to take those steps. Like, so I don't think, there should be any reason for doubt at the moment.
And there's a lot of Jalen Milroe's game. This goes back to the story that you read. There's a lot of Jalen Milroe's game that maybe doesn't fit, perfectly into what we've seen from a DeBoer team. But one of the things that does is DeBoer and Ryan Grubb, they like to go deep. And, Jalen Milroe was one of the best deep ball passers. He was putting the ball on the money.
And it's off
really
of it's off of straight dropbacks too, and not like play action throws, which Jalen Milroe has shown he's good at doing. And like, it's
DeBoer and Grubb, they're going to get this offense is going to find open receivers. And when you got, between, like I said, Jalen Hale, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams, like you could run 4 of those 5 guys out on the field, or maybe you could run all 5 of them on the field, and like somebody's getting open deep. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's almost impossible to cover all those guys. So if, it's going to be up to the things that I think Jalen Milroe is going to have to improve on is maybe pre-snap recognition. And I think that's just every young quarterback. Let's not forget that he was only a redshirt sophomore last year, his first year starting, didn't really play much because like you don't play much behind Bryce Young, So like you want to see some improvements with, his ability to read defenses before the snap, and then just finding his receivers and also just knowing when to take off and run. I think that's, taking that away from Jalen Milroe's game will be a failure. If you try to take away the running, he will fail as a quarterback. I know he doesn't. I know he calls himself a pass first quarterback, and I do think that he can throw the ball really well, but you don't take away your best gift. And I don't care what Jalen Milroe says about his game or what anyone says about his game. His athleticism and the fact that he can run is his best gift. Because there's other people that can throw the ball far and accurate. There's not many people his size that can run as fast as he can.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if he's good at the other stuff. It's just the rarity of his size and athleticism is just, you can't not take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So they're just going to have to find a way to do that. I'm looking forward to this. Is going to be a really interesting spring, just from so many aspects. Obviously a new coach, new scheme. Let's see how that goes. I mean, new coaches, and we didn't even talk about the defensive side of the ball where you got Kane Womack. Alabama's going to run a 4-2-5. And I know they've run a lot of 4-2-5s, but now you're going to see it like as the base defense. So that's going to be interesting. But then I think the quarterback position, I'm just going to be really interested to see how Jalen Milroe progresses, or if he doesn't, how the people behind him maybe make a run. Maybe we have a quarterback competition. Maybe we don't. I think either way, it's going to be entertaining though.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll have plenty of spring storylines, and we'll have them all, which is why you should subscribe to the site, Tide Illustrated, and to this channel, because we're gonna break it down on all the pods. Any final thoughts, Tony, before we segue to finish the show with basketball?
No, I just
wrapped it up.
Talked about with Jordan as well with basketball. I mean, so
yeah, there's lots to dive in there.
Yeah, really hot Alabama team. That may or may not be a SEC title favorite now. I mean, Nate Oates, I'll let Jordan kind of finish that, but Nate Oates had something to say about the defense, but all of a sudden Alabama sits alone atop the SEC standings. So
yeah, at the end of January, got vital basketball coming up. So we'll talk about that. We will kick it to Jordan and close out the show. Okay, we're going to finish the show. We've not dived into Alabama men's basketball for a little bit, but we've got Jordan back, and we've got a lot of good to talk about. I feel like last time we touched base, it was some kind of skepticism. It was non-con. They hadn't had a marquee win yet. They were going into some easier games, but now Jordan, Alabama is rolling. They're 6-1 in SEC play, 14-6 overall. Just coming off of wins against LSU, and more notably, of course, against Auburn in that rivalry game last week. What have been your thoughts on just kind of the start of conference play, that response to obviously a ugly loss in Knoxville? But yeah, just your thoughts on where this team stands now, alone in first place in conference. I don't think we would have been saying that a couple months ago.
No, when you saw them go 8-5 in non-con play, you knew that they were still a good team, and they lost to 3 really good teams and 2 pretty good teams in Ohio State and Clemson. Everybody knows the other 3 elite teams that they played. But going 8-5 in non-conference is never good. You don't want to lose that many games. I remember back in, I think, 2021, 2022 season when they did beat Gonzaga, Houston, Baylor, those teams, but they also lost a few bad games as well and didn't have the record to show for it in non-con. So you don't like leaving with that many losses, but I feel like Alabama learned a lot about themselves as well. And I think that's the most important thing that I think Nate Oates wants out of a tough schedule. Whether you win or lose, scheduling tough in college basketball always plays to your beneficiary. So it's always a beneficial thing for you to do. And it's showing with Alabama being top 10 in net, top 10 in KenPom. They're top 10 in every metric you can think of. And that's why. It's because they played tough games. They've played, obviously mediocre teams as well, but they've blown them out. And Nate Oates has figured out how to not cheat the system, but how to put the metrics your way. Mm-hmm. Dominate the lower tier, play really tough against the top tier, and then the rest will take care of itself. And it has. And I feel like Alabama should feel good about themselves. Obviously 6-1 in conference, 14-6 overall, but they're starting to gel. And for a totally different roster from last year, that's really what you were waiting on, is for this team to play together. And you're starting to see it, especially offensively. Defensively, it's still a work in progress, and everybody can say that, but you can start to see the camaraderie from this team start to come together at the right time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just like examining these last 2 games, I mean, just today or on Tuesday when we're recording this, like Oates had said to media, he thought LSU was maybe the best offensive game he thought his team played. I think against Auburn, you saw kind of that scrappiness come out where they won the blue collar stuff. They, didn't let Auburn do what it's done to a lot of teams, which is open up a really big lead, and then everyone's just trying to crawl their way back into it. I thought both of those games, it feels like really helped this team elevate to a point where, and again, a lot of this is dependent on how the rest of the SEC is doing and will do, but a team that can, challenge for this conference. I mean, they're right there. And that, I guess, is where I want to get your take next. I mean, you look ahead, or I guess, sorry, let me ask you this. Is this a team that can challenge an SEC play? And to summarize kind of what's happened so far in these last two games and with non-con and all that, have they fallen short, met, or exceeded your expectations?
So when I did kind of a preseason, how many games I thought they would win, and I had them at 23-8 overall, which I didn't think they would drop to Ohio State or Clemson at home. So that's kind of where I got stripped up. But I think they're right on schedule for what I thought they would be in conference play. I thought they'd win 12 or 13 games and they'd compete for a top 4 seed, and they're right there. Recently, I went, I believe, late last week, I believe. I went through every single game left in all of the conference for every team, and I predicted what the standings would look like just based off of what I know now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but projecting right now, I think Alabama will finish around 13-5, 21-10 overall, top 4 seed, tied for second with Kentucky and Auburn at the same record, and then Tennessee at the top. I think before the season, you would take that all day as an Alabama. You look at a top 4 seed, you think the record's not that great, but when you look at their top 5 strength of schedule, you kind of understand. But overall, I think Alabama will compete for an SEC title. Looking at their schedule, it's very doable. At Kentucky, at Auburn are basically the only 2 losses I can probably pencil in, even though I think Bama can give Kentucky a really good game. They need to win these games like on Wednesday night. Again, at Georgia, at Florida, at Ole Miss. These teams that are pretty good, on the verge of getting in the tournament type teams that you're playing on the road, which will be quad 1 wins at the end of the year more than likely. So this stretch, you beat Mississippi State on the road. Now you have to start, if you're, like Nato said, if you're going to win the SEC, you have to win these type of road games. So this is a really big test for Alabama to see, are they for real? Are they going to kind of separate themselves from not the rest of the conference per se, but maybe from Auburn or Kentucky? Can they take that next step before they head to Auburn next week? So it could be a pretty big week statement-wise for Alabama playing at Georgia and then home against an NCAA tournament team like Mississippi State on Saturday.
Yeah, I want to ask you more like about the general SEC and who you think could give Alabama problems. But let's zero in first on that Georgia game, because I think that can, of course, be a weird one. It's, the old saying goes, I don't know how old of a saying this actually is, but it's never easy to win on the road in the SEC, no matter who you're playing. And, Oates, again, talking to media, brought up that beatdown that Georgia gave Alabama on the road a couple of years ago. I think he said, as far as Ken Palm's been tracking, that's Alabama's worst loss ever. So, this is a team that Alabama has struggled with on the road under Oates. Looking at that game specifically, what maybe makes you, a little bit nervous, or where could Georgia maybe give Alabama some problems, and what has to go right, in a continuation from what was a great performance, I think, against LSU?
Georgia's scrappy, and just like LSU's scrappy. So they're not going to roll over and lay down just because you get a 7-8 point lead on them or hit a few threes in a row. They'll come right back and hit you as well. So Georgia is a lot like Alabama, to where they like to play a 4-guard lineup and then have a big inside. Russell Chiwa is their main big, and they like to play small. They like to shoot threes. They're not a great shooting team. I think they're probably top half of the SEC, but they're not elite by any means. But they have guys that are just walking microwaves, like Abdur Rahim, who put up 36 at Kentucky, and he can get hot at any time. And he had a down game last week, but they have guards that like to shoot the three. They like to get up and run as well. So it's going to be a battle of the backcourts, which I think favors Alabama pretty heavily. It's just, can Alabama shoot on the road? We haven't really seen it a whole lot. They played really well against Mississippi State when they played there. Against Vanderbilt, they shot the three very well to start out the game, but finished really cold. So it's sustaining a full game, which is something Nate Oates has stressed in recent press conferences. They haven't played a full game all year, he doesn't feel like, against Power 5 teams at least. So they always have a down half and a good half. This is a good time for them to come out and just take control early, have two good halves. They can beat Georgia by 14, 15 points on the road. That's how much I think Alabama's better than Georgia on paper. And if it was in Coleman, it would be a game that nobody would ever think about. But since it's in Athens, it's kind of, like you said, it's never easy. I mean, Alabama is 6-1 leading the conference, but they had to scrap and play with Vanderbilt all the way down to the wire, who hasn't won a game all year in conference. And Missouri gave them problems for like 25 minutes. So no game in conference is easy, especially on the road. So they're just going to have to come out. They're going to have to start fast. It's easy as that.
Yeah, I like what you pointed out with Georgia specifically. Russell Chi was an interesting, I think, player to watch for them just because Alabama, and again, it goes back to Mississippi State. Like, they handled a big really well. They're a much better big than Russell Chi, I'll add, and Tolu Smith. You can point to Grant's performance with him. But yeah, it's weirdly like not a lot of, because obviously Creighton and Arizona were both road games in non-con. I think this team's come a long way since then. But yeah, in conference play, this team, hasn't totally answered the bell, I think, to the point where you're fully convinced that they will get a 14, 15-point win against the Georgia. Because if you want to be, brought down and humbled a little bit as an Alabama fan, look at that Vanderbilt game. If you want to be encouraged for how they play on the road, you can look at Mississippi State. Or again, if you want to be humbled, look at Tennessee and how bad that turned out for them. But
yep.
Yeah, so just it can be an up and down. It's a grind. So this team, you're right, has to show up. Oates again was very blunt, was, kind of said, if some of the guys are maybe looking at the media at this Georgia team, they're probably looking past them, which you just cannot do, especially on the road in Athens or in anywhere in the SEC. Jordan, I'm gonna run through the rest of Alabama's games. I know you know them and predicted them. But on the road, they obviously got Georgia, Auburn, LSU. They go back on the road and face Kentucky on the road, which you mentioned, Ole Miss and Florida. They also play the Gators at home again, along with Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Tennessee, big game at home there, and Arkansas. Aside from, you mentioned Auburn and Kentucky, and personally, I'd maybe throw Tennessee in there too, even in Coleman. I think, the Vols are just a great team. Aside from those three teams that everyone will look at on paper and say, well, they're ranked high, a loss there is what it is. Who among those upcoming opponents has the best chance to maybe give Alabama that kind of shock loss that if they do want to win the conference, they can't afford to have?
Yeah, it's going to come down to those last two road games at Ole Miss, at Florida. Those are the only other two games. I think they'll beat Mississippi State at home. I had them beat Georgia on the road, at Auburn loss, at LSU. They should win. I mean, LSU gave them a good game in Coleman, but Alabama's better, so I'm going to predict them to beat LSU. Home against A&M win, home again. I don't think they'll lose another home game. I had them lose to Tennessee to kind of be a little bit conservative, and just based on what I saw them play at in Knoxville.
Yeah.
So with that, I had them lose to Tennessee, Kentucky, and Auburn. Mm-hmm. It came down to me at Ole Miss, at Florida. Those two teams are right on the cusp of making the tournament, and it's at the end of the year. And looking at Alabama's net being top 10, I figure they'll still be top 15-ish coming, the end of February, early March. They're going to be fired up to play that game and get a crucial big-time quad one win at the end of the season. So going on the road and playing a hungry team like that, or like those, it's going to be tough. I had them beat Ole Miss just because me personally don't think Ole Miss is a very good team. We'll find out a lot about them tonight when they play a rivalry game at home against Mississippi State. But I had them lose at Florida. I think they're better than Florida. But the timing of it, it's at the O-Dome. O-Dome's always crazy. And I could see them slipping up at Florida right before the end of the year. Probably some fatigue. Alabama typically kind of falters a little bit late February, early March anyways. But at Ole Miss and at Florida, if they win those two games, I think they're in position playing Tennessee at the end of the year. That could come down to the SEC regular season title.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. You know, those are two. You look at bracketology. I know you're checking all the time. I am too. Those are two teams that are firmly on the bubble, and as fired up as Alabama might be to get a big quad one win, you know, that's a seed altering game possibly for an Ole Miss or a Florida if they get to the point they want to be too. So, you know, yeah, those are two huge games that, you know, are on the road in what will be hostile environments in the SEC. So yeah, definitely a look ahead to that. Let's stick on bracketology for a minute, because I think that's just a fun. We're in hypothetical season right now. We have to watch these games play out. A ton could change. We love bracketology.
Yeah.
I believe Lenardi today had Alabama as a number 3 seed, obviously riding a little bit of a high. Is that the ceiling for this team? I mean, I guess not if they win out, but maybe based on your projections for the rest of their season, you know, where do you see them kind of realistically ending up seed wise? Because I think that's a situation where a lot could change for them, because they're not quite in that elite. They're in this in between where it's not a bad seed, but it might not be a top 16 team.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be as simple as that. If you win 14 in a row, win the regular season conference 8-6, or 20.
It's really not that hard. Yeah.
You could be a 1 seed there, but
Yeah.
no. All honestly, realistically, I think a 3 is their ceiling. I think they can fall as far as probably a 6, realistically, if they kind of go on a losing streak. I think their metrics will keep them propped up to stay out of that 7-10 game. Similar to what that 2021 team did when they won a bunch of big games, but lost to teams like Georgia and really bad teams in conference and finished middle of the pack. They were still a 6 with 13 losses. So it's going to be a case of best case a 3, worst case probably a low 5, high 6. I don't see them falling because the bubble is really weak this year. So It's going to come out to they've played a lot tougher schedule. They probably won better games, no bad losses more than likely, and they're going to stay firmly in that 3 to 6 range.
Yeah, I think I agree. And again, it's a big difference. Like, I don't know when you're looking at a bracket, you know, what would you rather be? It's like, because for me, I always think about that a lot. Like, would you rather be a 5 or a 6? Because it's a 5, you're playing a 4 the next round, but you have, you know, the 12's always nasty for that and upsets it. Like, I guess, you know, if not a 3, you know, would you want them to be maybe more on that 6 line versus that 4 line? I don't know. Maybe that's a dumb question.
No, it's definitely a fair question. What seed do you want to be to make a run? You really just have to see the field.
Yeah.
But me personally, I would say probably around a 5, where Auburn was when they made their Final Four run. Even though they went through some really tough teams, there's also more chance that a 13 is going to beat that 4 next in the first round than, say, you know, if you're a 3 seed, you play the 2. There's less likely that a 15 is going to beat that 2.
Sure.
So there's a chance for an upset before. There's a chance for an upset for you as well. Don't get me wrong. We see it every year at least once. But the chance that you're going to play, I always want to play the lesser team if you can, with the potential for more upsets along the way on your side. And I just feel like if you're a 4 or a 5, they're basically the same. I'd rather be that than a 3, honestly. So, yeah, I would probably say a 4 or a 5 is typically the best spot to be in.
That's good insight. No, I don't disagree with you. It's interesting when it's like, well, you know, you don't necessarily want to always be the highest seed possible. Sometimes you can play to your benefit. And yeah, you have that's the beauty of March, is you have to watch it all.
Recently have been very fortunate that the bubble's been really weak. So if you have a weak bubble, you're playing a week 8-9 matchup. So playing a Mississippi State level team the second round, which, you know, if you're a 1 stock, Alabama was last year playing Maryland, you knew Maryland wasn't good enough to beat Alabama. So there's that. But, you know, there's only, you know, if you're going to be that elite, then you probably don't have nothing to worry about. But if you're going to be in the 4 to 5 range, I think that would probably be the best spot to kind of ride out in. You seem to see more 4 and 5 seeds make runs than you do 3 seeds per se.
Yeah, it's sneaky. It's always those numbers.
See teams like Grand Canyon in the second or the first round, though, like some of those Mountain West, those lower mid-major teams out west, Midwest. They're good, man. They play fundamental basketball, and that those mid-majors that do that are sneaky good.
Definitely. We'll have a long conversation, I'm sure, about possible bubble and best and worst matchups for them. Yeah, that'll be a good time. Jordan, I want to talk about a little bit of the future now with this team and looking way ahead. Because there's been some speculation, whether it's on our board and stuff, with just looking at this class. I know they had the 2 McDonald's All-Americans. Even looking ahead to 2025, they had Mikel Brown Jr. at the, I believe, LSU game. He took a visit and talked about his visit. Seems pretty excited about Alabama. Maybe a point guard of the future option. What do you know about him? And then, your impressions with Sherelle and them getting on the McDonald's All-Americans.
Yeah, I kind of touch on Sherelle and Reed. Reed has been out with a knee injury, so he won't play in the game. But it's well deserved for him. It's a minor knee injury. He'll be fine come season time. But very well deserved for both of them. Nas Cunningham, the third signee, was up for nomination but didn't get it. Former number 1 overall player in the class. But yeah, it was awesome to see them. Those two are going to be impact players year one. Next year when they step on campus. And it could alleviate a sting if Rylan Griffin decides to leave for the pros. The way he's playing, I do not blame him at his frame, his athletic ability and profile, and his shooting ability. It's just what plays in the NBA right now. But Darion Reed could definitely step in and replace Rylan Griffin. No problem. He's that talented. They're both future pros, talking about Sherelle and Darion Reed. But Mikel Brown Jr., I got to talk to him and did a full-length interview, and which is on Tide Illustrated as well. He's a super nice kid. He's only 16 years old, and he's, he doesn't have the college frame, obviously, being 16. He's a smaller point guard at 6'1", 6'2". But he's really blossomed at Overtime Elite in Atlanta, and he's a wizard with the basketball. He's an elite three-point shooter. He can get to every spot on the court. He loves Alabama too, man. He loves them. He loves Nate Oates. He knows Sam Walters and Chris Parker. He's from Tampa, Florida, so he's played with those guys in high school before. He's good friends with them. They've kind of showed him around campus and kind of told him about the program, what they expect of him. And then, he went on his official visit, and then he came back, 2 weeks later for an unofficial. He was there with 2026 five-star Caleb Holt from Buckhorn, and they were chopping it up, having a good time. I texted Mikel afterwards, and he seemed really pumped. He loved it. Saw a good game, up and down game, scored 109 points. So got to see the full extent of how Nate Oates' system works and how free the guards play, and how it would be a dream for a guard to play like him to play in that kind of system. I know he really likes Alabama. He's taking a visit to Ole Miss this week. I think it starts today. He could reclass to 2024. From what I'm told, it's pretty much a done deal that he will. He hasn't come out and said that publicly, but I would be shocked if he didn't. Now he is a smaller guy, so he's gonna have to fill out and everything. Obviously, he's 16 years old, but to get him, which will be a five-star in 2024, either class, he's gonna be a five-star. To get him with Sherelle and Reed would be phenomenal for next year. Takes out the need to get a point guard out of the portal, which they were going to look to do, and then have the potential for Mark Sears coming back next year for a fifth year. So you're not going to have to worry about playing them right away, starting out wise. So yeah, he would be a huge addition, and I'm keeping my eye on him for sure, as I think Alabama is probably the favorite to land him right now.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of steam's building toward that. I know fans were excited about his visit, or his unofficial him coming back and making that choice to do that. That's the last thing I had with. I know Sears and Latrell Wrightsell are two guys who people don't realize they do have eligibility, believe it or not, still with COVID. At this point in the season, do you think maybe those guys will, either one of them or both, come back and try and keep this point guard depth kind of bulked up here? And that, obviously with Mark coming back, that would be, a massive thing for Alabama in 2024.
Yeah, anytime you get a All-American top player, the point guard come back would be phenomenal. And at this time, I think he probably will. I think the only thing that would keep him from leaving would be if he got a good enough draft grade or got promised a two-way deal in the draft, and he just wants to go, leave school, go play pro, and because you're getting paid just as much in college as you would the G League, so money's not an issue. It's just, is he ready to go play pro and get out of college? But I think he's coming back as of now, and I would be surprised if Latrell Wrightsel's not back either. So I think he'll come back. He'll use up his COVID year, be a massive addition. Nate Oates can't have enough scorers on the team. So I think he would be back. He's coming on really strong at the end of the year. It took him a little while to get used to the SEC, physicality and everything and the speed of the game. But, I think they could bring back a lot of players from this year's team. Jaron Stevenson, people were wondering if he might leave. And I don't see it.
I don't either.
He chose Tuscaloosa over Chapel Hill, and he lives right down the road. He's a legacy. He wants to be at Alabama. He's not going to get drafted. He's had a little slow start to the year. He has times where he looks like one of the better players on the floor, and sometimes he looks lost. I mean, that's just being a 17, 18-year-old freshman, should be a senior in high school. So I think he'll be back. He should be guaranteed a starting spot with Grant Nelson not going to come back. And, you got guys like Sam Walters, Little Mo Diabate, trying to think who
Chris
else?
Parker, Devin Cosby.
Parker and Davin. I think Cosby will probably leave. He could get a lot of playing time elsewhere. Love the kid. He plays hard, great shooter, but I think he could be a really good player elsewhere. Chris Parker, I know they want to keep him, just like they want to keep Mo Diabate, because he has a lot of potential and a lot of juice offensively. And Mo Diabate's great on both ends. So there's guys from freshman classes the freshman class that they really want to keep, which is not what Nate Oates' teams typically do. They're typically in 1 year, out the next, and here comes some transfers.
Mm-hmm.
He really likes this transfer class. I think he felt really close to them and really liked everything about them. So I think you might see some continuity finally for this Alabama team, and go hunt for a big man in the portal. That would be their number one big need that they would need to go out and get. So I think you might see pretty much the same basketball team this year as you will next year, adding the freshman class and maybe a transfer too.
Yeah, we'll see. I kind of agree with you. I think, the clarity on the continuity and how, viable that could be will be good. Jordan Harper, you can find his stuff on Tide Illustrated, just like the rest. Subscribe. We're getting big in on basketball now, with football in the midst of the offseason. So we'll keep diving into everything. Should be back next week with another new episode for you guys to enjoy. Until then, everybody take it easy. We'll be back, hopefully, talking more Alabama basketball wins.